game, but for you and me, I'd rather just recap the overall game in a few paragraphs and skip the least of the painful. Which title screen features Lisa, who is still not having an exceptionally good time. If you think this game is going to start off less morbid, nah. This is Brad. Brad is Lisa's brother, and overall Brad feels very, very guilty over Lisa's suicide and wishes that he could have done more to save her. And he feels an unequivocal hatred towards Marty, and an unequivocal remorse for Lisa's death. Again, this is a really, a dark setup. However, if you think this is the entire RPG, you're very, very wrong. As immediately after this, you flash forward many years and get put into a world after an event known as the White Flash. This event is pretty simple. One day the Flash happened and eradicated every single woman on Earth. And this setup, despite its strangeness, sets the tone in the world up very well. Now before it's inevitably brought up, yes, I know transgender people exist, I know sexuality exists, and yada yada. And they're cool, I like that. But the point of this event is very simple. The human race is doomed. With reproduction off the table, humanity has a predetermined set amount of time of existence before eventually the last guy dies. And that's that. There's nothing else to do. And I'm sure people have really nitpicked this concept to hell and back, but don't overanalyze this. There's a lot of shit to come that requires that more. Back to what I was saying, after the Flash happens, you come across a baby. Now other than the concern that you just randomly found a baby out in the middle of fucking nowhere, which is already fucking strange seeing how every woman on Earth is dead, this baby is also a woman, in a world full of nothing but men. That's not particularly fucking good, because this makes her the target of very literally every single fucking man on the planet. So Brad being the one to find her is simultaneously great in the fact that he is going to be immensely protective of her. But it's also not a fantastic thing because he's going to inherently be very limited in his thought process over the death of Lisa. So this goes on a few years and Brad is immensely overprotective of this child, who was eventually named Buddy, to a fault, in a lot of ways mirroring his father. And you can't really fault the guy, as you're going to see this caution and anxiety is going to be very much warranted, as one day Brad wakes up to find that she's kidnapped, and most if not all of my friends have been outright killed or beaten up relentlessly. But not before you wake up from an alcohol-induced sleep and rescue this guy named Terry Hint from a puppy named Cheeselegs. Yeah, this game is going to have just as much zany and strange as dark and traumatic. Why do I keep saying traumatic? This is the second recording in a row I failed this. Whatever, talking to him reveals that his name is Terry Hints. He's generally pretty full of himself. He gives hints and... Wait, what the fuck did I just do? Shit. I just activated pain mode. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you what this mode does. It's recommended for players on a repeat playthrough. I am very much not a player on a repeat playthrough. And what it does is it makes every save point expendable, only being able to be used once, some more different and difficult enemies, as well as a secret ending. Now I'm sure most people will just restart here, but fuck it. I'm a sucker for pain, let's see how this goes. So yeah, sorry for that sidetrack, I just had to mention it. Everybody's dead, Buddy is gone, let's go find her. After a bit of traveling and combat, we get jump scared by a car. And here comes the first really difficult choice in the game. Either you let him kill Terry, or he steals all of your belongings. The obvious choice here is letting him kill Terry. But here's the thing. He is fucking worthless. I mean, very blatantly, he's god-awful. But, if years of playing turn-based RPGs like this have taught me anything, worthless piece of garbage characters like Terry will, at some point in the late game, become a near godlike deity. I'm sure there's an archetype named specifically for this type of character, but that does end up being the case as he very literally has the most powerful move in the entire game. So, yeah. We let him take our stuff and we're on our merry way. We get another party member, proceed to a nearby factory, and... Okay, so let's talk about Joy. Joy is a drug used in-game that simultaneously makes you feel nothing, yet also many claim that it makes you feel good. You can use it in combat to get rid of your joy withdrawals, and it's generally an uber powerful buff you're heavily pushed to use in difficult fights. But that's the thing right there. Joy is an incredibly addictive drug, and Brad hasn't been against using it before. The first scene you see Brad in after the time skip is him contemplating using it or not. And although it makes you feel nothing, it also impacts you psychologically and increases your violent tendencies, as seen in battle with the damage increase. And on the withdrawal note, also seen in battle because every now and then you'll have a withdrawal and it makes your next few attacks do absolutely no damage. However, that isn't the worst effect of Joy, and we'll get into that much later. We push forward and there's a guy here telling us if we fall off a cliff enough, we get a cool karate move. So, sure, why not? We return to town, do some more antics, and... yeah, outside of the premise you're going to see a lot of visions of your dad and Lisa. They're all pretty ominous, but luckily for us, none of them are jump scares. If you remember what I talked about in Off specifically in Zone 3, this is the general uneasiness that I enjoy. Eventually you make your way towards the first crossroads. The crossroads is something used very heavily in Lisa, and it's generally how your progression is marked. For the painful, you're going to have a Crossroads 1, Crossroads 2, and Crossroads 3. And honestly, you're pretty heavily incentivized to back goddammit cliffs. Look, I had a paragraph here describing how much I dislike cliffs, but essentially can boil down to one sentence. If you suffer from crippling ADHD like me, and cannot go more than 2 seconds without pressing a button, you are very likely to fall off a cliff at one point and instantly die, which is annoying because saves are infrequent, especially in hard mode. That's it. Fucking gravity. Also, here's the boss battle I did first. Although I don't know if it's strictly a boss battle, but I think it is. Either way, it was a pretty brutal fight, but I managed to barely finish it with Brad being my only survivor. And after a few more pretty easy encounters throughout the rest of this area, we can get a bunch of fire bombs, which are really heavily incentivized to use against this guy right here, in a different area of the crossroads. You need to kill him to get the bike, both for progressing the story, and because it's a massive fucking convenience. I also died here after running away from him with barely any health, and getting into a random encounter with a snake. So I lost a bit of progress there, but eventually I came back better than ever, and even with a new party member. So let's begin our battle. This right here is a Joy mutant. We'll discuss them in more depth way later, although their name makes it pretty blatant on what they are. They're scary. This one isn't too bad, but they're a lot more frequent later on in the game, and they will fucking decimate you if you aren't prepared. We use our firebombs against him, get the bike, and the cool thing about the bike is this jump right here. This means you can jump over short ledges, meaning you have more areas to backtrack to, but it also makes more areas accessible. There's actually a genuinely great piece of game design as soon as you unlock it that's brought up fairly frequently in analysis videos. So the second you unlock this, you're supposed to go to the right. You can't go to the left, and you're not exactly going to fucking fly, so go to the right. And if you hold down right, which you probably are, your character automatically does a little jump, and that's supposed to show the player, oh cool, you can jump over ledges now. And that opens their mind to areas that they want to go to, or maybe even areas they passed over already that they still want to go to. But instead, I did this. Who even cares about level design anyways? Anyways, after obtaining the bike, I go on a few mini adventures. I found this guy in particular, and I used a joy pill to defeat him, because my last save was before that fight, and also before the encounters and getting to him, and fuck it, I'm not going to do that again. I didn't really use this party member much, and there's nothing notable about this encounter, other than the fact that I, as a player, chose to use joy, so keep that in mind. Foreshadowing. The rest of the crossroads are smaller little adventures, and outside of specific segments, I'm going to generally keep their length pretty brief, because unlike a game like Off where there's only a few very curated zones, this game has a lot more, although their quality and themes tend to be very sporadic, and a whole lot of them don't really have a whole lot to discuss about. which I am going to say outright is a good thing. This game is unlike its predecessor in the fact that there's a lot of ridiculous, a lot of fun, and zany. However, for this video in particular, there's not really a whole lot to get into, so yeah. It's just better off to address the important parts. Here's the President's Hair Club. They're very hard. And again, just like the Joy Mutant, you're going to really want fire bombs to kill this off. I didn't have any, and I died. So I needed to backtrack and get some more stuff. And here's something I really want to say. This game's balancing is fucking fantastic. Although the variety of party members inherently means there are just some that are way more OP than others, due to how common party death is in this game, you're usually not going to roll with just one OP party unless you know the game's consequences and or save scum. Are there OP combos? Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I kind of min-maxed my team towards the end on accident. But that's not really what I want to talk about, because this kind of directly ties into the thing I love the most. The items and item management. Items in this game are massively important. And they're generally pretty scarce, so you usually unlock them through backtracking, going through optional areas, enemies, etc. And this goes along with the game's currency. Even with my stupidly OP min-max team, I was struggling to get any more than 300 magazines, which really isn't a whole lot when you look at the shops. Because of this, healing is also massively important because you're never really given an overabundance of items, and this directly correlates with resting. You're not just given a button that restores your health. There are set locations in the world to rest, and those have a lot of random encounters that can range from inconveniences, something bad a la losing your party members, something scary, and something completely fucking awful. I believe in the entire game there's only one location in the entire game that is 100% safe to use infinitely, but I believe that's a glitch. So instead, you're heavily incentivized to sleep in inns. When sleeping out in the wild can sometimes cost you a party member, or have this shit happen, I was more than willing to go out of my way for minutes at a time just so I can know I can stay safe and not have a party member die, or... This is off script, but there's a random % chance when you sleep the entire screen will turn black until you rest again or quit the game, and holy shit. No. And also entirely off topic again, but I just fucking adore % chance things to happen in video games. Something like Doki Doki, where every person's going to have their own little story of something that creeped them out, or was weird, or what have you. I don't know what it is, but I'm always more than ecstatic to see them in video games. Anyways, the point I'm getting at here is that the item management in this game is impeccable. And I say it constantly throughout this video, you don't really play these games for balanced experiences. But this is like, genuinely one of the best designed RPGs I've ever played? Which is strange, because this happens. My one and only big complaint is that there's areas in every crossroads where you can easily farm infinite magazines and experience at a shockingly high rate. I know why it needed to exist, and honestly I'm removing 2 paragraphs from the script of this video exclusively because saying it out loud I could very well be in a minority with this opinion, especially since permadeath is a pretty frequent occurrence later on. And ultimately, if it cheapens your experience, you could just entirely opt out of doing this. But I don't know what it is, whenever I see guides that explicitly recommend that you do this for a few minutes just so the early game is easier, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting dangerously close to the Dark Souls difficulty debate territory. And to be fucking honest, I already hate debate bros. And if there's one topic I know debate bros love in video games, it's just jerking each other off about video game difficulties, so fuck it. I'm gonna put my thoughts on screen. If you want to read through a few paragraphs, you can. I'd rather not dilute the video with this, and especially since I'm discussing the exact contrary in a later game, so yeah. After returning to the Hair Club and completely decimating them, we unlock the truck keys, which gives us a very easy way to backtrack to any previous or current crossroads. And after another extremely difficult boss fight, thanks to pain mode, we find one of our friends extremely wounded, tie him up, and ask him where Buddy is. This is where Brad's violent tendencies due to joy really start to pop up as you ruthlessly beat this man for answers, and after continued silence you begin beating him with a club, and eventually he begs for you to stop and tells you where she is, but you don't relent and keep beating him over and over and over again until you mercilessly kill him. Fun. Also immediately after this, more pain. Here's Buzzo, and now you have a choice between sacrificing a random party member, who funnily enough was Terry yet again, or your left arm. You also have the option to try and kill him, which isn't going to happen. Although beating him is possible with a preset game plan utilizing a bunch of status conditions and items, you have to go extremely out of your way to do that, and even then, if you do manage to defeat him, you just get a game over screen. So, yeah. He wipes the floor with us in one move, and fortunately we don't have to go back to the last save. It just pops us right back here to the initial question. I let him cut off my left arm, which decreases my attack and defense, removes all abilities that require my left arm, and makes my joy withdrawals more prevalent and craved. This game fucking sucks. I love it. Here's a funny bike section. Despite having one arm, Brad is more than capable of perfectly driving a motorcycle while simultaneously running over multiple people who dare stand in his way. So that's neat. Anyways, here's Rando. As you can probably tell by the fact I just ran a fucking motorcycle into him and I was the one who got thrown over, he's kinda fucking strong. Despite this though, he actually apologizes and gives us 8 of one of the best healing items in the entire game. That's Rando. He's nice, and he'll be very important later. Also, just in case the tragedy hasn't been as excessive recently with your arm getting cut off and violently beating one of your lifelong friends to death, you're now put into a mandatory Russian roulette section where you have to throw your party members into roulette and win a few times before leaving. I don't have any fault with this on paper, but I do want to say I do not advocate for save scumming in this game whatsoever. I think a lot of the themes become dampened when you just go back and save your party members after every death. However, this is kind of the one that I would advocate the most for, because it's very easy to lose, 4, 5, or even 6 party members in one go, while in other playthroughs you might lose like 1 or 2. And unlike the grief you feel when you lose them during a very difficult encounter, or sacrifice, or story reason, this one's just a 50-50. Over and over and over again. If it makes sense, I feel like you probably should have had a maximum of like 3 party member deaths at most. The fact that it's very possible for you to lose your entire party and have to redo this entire section all over again anyways, yeah, I'd advocate for save scumming for this. Not for anything else though, and I do want to clarify, permadeath is permadeath, you're not getting them back. So although I like this segment, especially somebody who tends to prefer the Iron Man runs and tactical strategy games, I think there's just way too many variables and horseshit that can happen for this to be a liked feature of the game. Speaking of which, let's talk about party members' role in the story. Or I guess the lack thereof. Party members in this game are kind of like offs in a way, where despite them having personalities, having unique ways you recruit them, and all of them having unique traits or valuable skills, you oddly care less about them as individual characters as much as you care about having them in your party and your experiences with them. It's like playing a turn-based strategy game where, yeah, the individual characters don't really motivate you. If Tsundere Knight 259 dies, that isn't really all too much of an emotional gut punch. They're like a cardboard cutout of a character. However, when Tsundere Knight 259 has been with you for hours and hours, has had individual clutch moments for herself and for other party members, and you've enjoyed utilizing her through your game through thick and thin, and then Tsundere Knight 259 dies, shit dude, I don't know if Tsundere Knight 258 is all that good of a replacement anymore. Anyways, Crossroads 2 is full of quirky moments. I hired a hentai artist for an absurd price, and I never even used him. Then this funny part where I ran over a lot of people with my personal killdozer, and one of the most weirdly emotional fucking fights I've ever had. And then this comic antic. This isn't all too scary, but at 2 AM in a relatively dark room all by myself? No, I didn't like it. There's a mech battle, and here's Wally. He exists. He's revered as a god for serving people fast food, so that's cool, I guess. It's honestly really fucking creepy and only gets more obscure from here. Your dad is going to be showing up a lot more. There's already been a few trauma-induced flashbacks and hallucinations already, but they're only going to continue more and more and more over time. I'm also going to go ahead and skip straight to Crossroads 3, as there's a lot of points I want to bring up, and I feel like Crossroads 2 doesn't have a whole lot to mention that I can't directly correlate to 3, so yeah. You start this Crossroads yet again with a choice. This one is probably the most one-sided, but in a really disturbing way. Here's Buddy. You have your choice between your 3 party members or her nipple. Practically the choice should always be the latter. She does have 2, and it's your entire party's lives at stake here. But does that make it feel particularly good? No. Or alternatively, if you've been exploring, you could save scum and sacrifice 3 random doinky party members you are never going to use and keep her chest intact. So, again, I kind of need to bring up save scumming. Just like the infinite grinds, I feel like it kind of ruins the game if you frequently abuse this. In repeat playthroughs, yeah, sure. You're not going to send out your 3 best party members into the front lines if you know they're going to die in the next segment. But if you do this on your first playthrough, you're going to ruin a lot of what makes it special. Especially if you haven't been paying attention to your reserves or have only been using one preset party. This choice is fucking awful. And I love it. And I can't help but feel that this choice is ruined if instead of the characters you've been loving and utilizing through the entire playthrough are sacrificed, it's just 3 random fuckwits you have no idea about. That's pretty much all I have to say. After this, there's also a very funny segment that, I won't lie, made me laugh out loud far more than I would like to admit. Just fucking kidding, all of your inventory or your other arm, which one will it be, fuckaroo? Don't bother asking why either, or else both things happen, XDDDDDDD. So here's Crossroads 3. Brad is now armless, but that doesn't matter because my team is, fucking insanity. I don't want to dedicate an entire segment to this because it's nitpicky, but if you want to turn this game into a complete cakewalk, just get Birdie for stupid cheap and have a team that utilizes gasoline plus fire. Anyways, let's talk about joy moons, because there was a segment I left out earlier and one I mentioned briefly that we can now talk about. When you take joy repeatedly, after a while you slowly begin your transformation into a joy moon, which is an incredibly powerful yet completely deranged being that is a complete abomination. In this transformation you only have one instinct, to enact or indulge in your deepest desires. Which is why a lot of the time after they transform suddenly, they tend to immediately massacre everyone near them and they become frighteningly lethal. And why some are more than content to just sit around relatively harmless. And when I mean lethal, holy shit I mean lethal. When I mentioned earlier that death becomes more and more frequent over time, although that's already happened with the story, in battle, most late-game mutants have at least one move, if not more, that will instantly kill a party member if it lands. That's not very good. Anyways, on to why this is particularly bad news bears. Other than the joy that you can take in-game, you're also force-fed joy during a specific segment, and that essentially means one thing. Your transformation is pretty much inevitable now. So have fun avoiding the suicidal football helmet wearing bombers before you take on a stupid football team captain, and god fucking damn it he's here too. Crossroads 3. You have to go down all these areas so you can make a boat. I don't really like skimming over this again, especially after completely glancing over most other segments, but this is essentially a continuation of everything I talked about. Sacrifice and death is going to be a lot more frequent. Enemies are overall significantly scarier, since joy mutants are more common than ever. Your hallucinations of Lisa and your dad get more and more and more common, your violent outbreaks get more and more disturbing, and listen to that fucking music. Oh yeah, I didn't have a dedicated music segment. It's really good. For Lisa. It fits the tone of the game perfectly, but I don't know if I would recommend more than maybe a quarter for personal listening, unless you're just a shitposter who has a dumb cock and ball torture playlist like I do. Although I think this is in Lisa the Joyful, let's go ahead and take a quick look at 666 Kill Chop Deluxe. What the fuck is happening? Also, another song that isn't in this game I don't think, but I think is just beautiful, is Broken Tooth March. It's a bop, and I don't know why this is completely off topic, but there's a mix of it with Young Venus from Nuclear Throne, and I just fucking love that game, and god damn it, this song is great. I want to completely derail for a second here. I fucking love Nuclear Throne, I think it's a great game, and I'm sad more people don't play it. Anyways, after this, you get your boat, you start going after Buddy, and this is the point of no return once you get on. You're done. No exploring, no grinding, no items, you're all in. I do want to say one thing abruptly though, and that is, this isn't a complete all-in segment. I mean, you can't go back, but you don't have to worry about being soft-locked or being in a difficult scenario or what have you. You're very much not going to die. Anyways, after you get on the island, the person who made and drove the boat, yeah, he lives up to his looks. You eventually find Buddy, and oh my shit, oh my fuck, it's my dad, and he's with Buddy, and he's still drinking alcohol, and he's looking as depraved as ever, and Buddy is sitting right next to a bunch of joy. Oh goddamn fuck, massacre him. Now this is probably one of my favorite moments in the entire game, as well as pretty much all these games. This fight right here is hardly fair. You're throwing fireballs at your dad all the while he's kicking up dirt and scratching you. And Buddy fucking despises seeing this. She doesn't want you to fight him and runs to protect him. All the while sobbing and begging you not to hurt him. All the while you completely lose the option to attack your dad. If you want to attack him, you have to do what your dad did to you and attack Buddy. She doesn't damage you. Her only attempts at retaliation are crying, guarding, and measly scratches that do no damage. It's fucking dark. I don't say this to shit on off, especially because these two games are radically different, but it takes everything I love about the ending of that game and perfects it. Okay, honestly, I don't want to spoil past games when covering current games, but the more I think about it, the more I think these games' endings are comparable in a way. I'm not going to elaborate on that further because, again, you should be able to skip this video and not worry about spoilers or previous segments, but if you know, you know. Eventually Buddy is out of the way and you finally get to kill your dad. And here's where an interesting hypothetical is kind of directly shoved down your throat. Can you forgive your abusers if they've bettered themselves as people and are no longer who you once hated? I'm not going to answer this question. I'm also not even going to bother gauging with it or providing my 2 cents. Not out of lack of interest because I've thought about this exact thing before, but there's a lot of variation. It's too much variation. And although I could go on about my life experiences and my personal thought process, that's not your life. I'm not you, and no matter what, I wouldn't be able to personally know you enough to rationalize that as a yes or a no. And even if I did somehow know you enough with the power of parasocial relationships, I'm still in no fucking way qualified to give you an answer. I could really go on and on and on about this one point for way too long, but I'd rather not because ultimately I don't know you and you don't know me, and it's debatable at best, genuinely fucking harmful at worst, so no. Anyways, afterwards you black out and wake up near the beach, and if you return to your dad, he is just completely tenderized. He's gone. Nothing remains. All the more, Buddy stole your boat while you were incapacitated, so you have to improvise on how to get to the last island of the game. I know it's ultimately a very small thing, but your bike not being available in this area and the next is genuinely a very good design decision. Eventually you find Buddy, who is currently getting assaulted by somebody who completely tore out her left eye and permanently and irreparably damaged her face, so that his mark will forever be left on this world. This is only more brutal if you also had her mutilated before, so yeah. Fun game, right? Eventually you kill him. Buddy runs off again after telling Brad that he took everything from her, that Marty was a better father in a few days than Brad ever was, that Brad was a monster, and you quite literally become a failure. Everything you dreaded about and hated about your dad, you became, but only because you cared and wanted, more than anything else, to be unlike your dad and be a good parent towards Buddy. Afterwards, you get to explore the base a lot more, and this is where the items went from mostly rations and healing items to lots of firebombs and items to deal immense amounts of damage. Then this scene plays out. I love this, and although you're very much given the feeling that this is all or nothing, you're supposed to completely decimate everything in your way, including a literal army of soldiers and all of your friends who got you to where you are. The battle background is an obscure vortex of red, and the music starts off pretty upbeat before transitioning into a more dark and somber tune before people start commenting that you're a monster. You're not human. And they mean this very literally. Everybody in the entire world is in the way of Buddy. The one thing you want to protect the most. You're turning into a mutant, and you're given the last two skills in the entire game you'll ever unlock. Cry and Scream. With your innumerable amount of firebombs and healing items, you're going to completely decimate everything in your way. And it ends with Rando. He's the last thing that stands in your way of Buddy, and you eventually defeat him too after the first real battle of this entire segment. He's really fucking strong. Afterwards you have to crawl back to Buddy, in which she screams at you everything I've been saying up to this point, and you're given one final option. Hold Brad in his last dying breaths, or ignore his one last wish and let him die truly alone. After you make your choice, a little bit of time passes and the credits begin to roll. And the cool thing about this game is I'm still realizing new shit about it even as I'm scripting. Look at the credits. This isn't right. This isn't right. And after enough time passes by, you wake up while Brad is transforming into a mutant, and you find Buddy all by herself. You start crawling up to her, a loud noise plays, and the screen fades to black. And this is where you have 3 potential ending slides that can potentially play out. Potentially. Since I did this in pain mode, we're getting the pain mode ending. In this you see a child who had his face sawed off viciously and claims it was for Lisa. This is Dusty, and after you leave he cries out for you but refers to you not as Master Armstrong or Brad, but Dad. That is Rando. That is why his face is fucked up, you're a terrible person. The other 2 endings you can potentially get is if you use Joy, or you play through the entire game without using Joy at all. I'll cover this a little bit more in Least of the Painful, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my thoughts. There is a lot I love about this game. There are a lot of RPGs and story-driven games that pride itself in making the main character unlikable and force you to do things that you don't want to do. But this is the game I believe that does it best. I'll be honest, I'm just going to go ahead and link a video in the description of this one, and if you like this at all and you trust my evaluation even the slightest bit, I would highly recommend watching it. It is a great video. I love this game. I love how it deals with sacrifice, how it deals with relationships, how it deals with trauma and abusers, and how it deals with a lot of other very touchy and controversial subjects I feel often get ignored for being too controversial and touchy. And to clarify, that's not exactly a bad thing. I personally love fiction that covers these heavy, heavy topics. But I know I'm not alone when I say that I don't need to mentally prepare myself every time I launch a game. Even if it's a heavily story-based one, I don't want to deal with child abuse and trauma and whatever the fuck this is on a regular basis. But the thing I want to say is that this game does those concepts fantastically. Which is fucking strange because you're going from these heavy topics to whatever the hell this is, or that is, or this thing. But genuinely, if you're interested in playing a game that explores those concepts, I would highly recommend this one to play. I feel like just like a lot of games in this video, you kind of ruined the game for yourself by watching this, especially for the really heavy choices, but unlike Off, I feel like there's enough explorations and decisions between point A and point B to still recommend this. There's still also Lisa the Joyful if you want to play a direct expansion to this, and there's so many fan games. I haven't covered fan games in this video, and that's because a lot of them are really good, and I could probably make another video with the equal length to this one on fan games alone. But the point I want to get at is that, at least from what I've heard anecdotally, the fan games for Lisa are particularly pretty good. I wouldn't be able to tell you the best ones, but just do a quick Google search and I'm sure you'll find one. And I swear to God, this isn't me algorithming, but if you've actually played any fan games, please let me know which ones are good. Both because I'm interested and there might be others who are, so. I think Off has a couple really good ones too, but this is besides the point. Good game, love how it tackles its subjects, and its really bizarre world building is surprisingly good for what it is. Also, I'm saying this as a bit of parasocial banter, but I am frequently reading through all these 30-minute long scripts just to ensure I'm getting everything right because I've left all these games extremely sentimental. It is fucking inevitable I'm going to miss something or get something wrong if I haven't already, but god damn it, I love all these games and I'm sad because god damn it, I am in no way qualified to talk about these in depth, and I am just me. So after Lisa the Painful is Lisa the Joyful. And I hate to spoil the entire video this early on, but Lisa the Joyful doesn't mean happy. It's not very joyful. Brad isn't going to reanimate back to his human self and go, yep, let's go to happy fun time land, buddy. We are going back firmly into the depresso zone. This is further evidenced by the title screen, which is doing better than ever, with the once lifeless dangling corpse now being completely covered in blood from an unknown amount of time dangling from the noose. Now for a real thinker on this one, the game doesn't immediately start with child abuse. Instead, it just really quickly devolves into child abuse. As far as I'm concerned, this is a new fucking record. Buddy is immediately given a message by Brad, and one that isn't necessarily wrong. Brad wants Buddy to be prepared, and the best way for her to be prepared is to know that the world and the people in it are going to be dangerous and cruel. And he teaches her to become numb and be able to take a life at a moment's notice. It's kill or be killed, and he doesn't want his daughter to be weak. And this is just like, genuinely heart-wrenching to watch unfold. The type of scenario that no child should ever have to go through, but kind of has to in this world. And then the game begins literal seconds before Lisa the Painful ends. And I mean seconds, that's not hyperbole. The first real encounter we have to go through in this game is against Brad, who attacks Buddy. I honestly have no clue why in all truthfulness, but he's doing it. The combat in this game is a lot smoother. You're going to be playing Buddy through the entire thing, obviously, and for better and for worse, she's really fun to control and play. She has a little timing minigame in her attacks that I personally really enjoy seeing, although I wish it was expanded a bit more. Like, for example, the Mario & Luigi series are some of my favorite RPGs to play just because their turn-based strategy is a lot more involved. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only timing-related attack to the entire game, which is absolutely okay. Don't get me wrong, Buddy doesn't need a dedicated jump button so she can avoid swords or pedophiles or whatever, but another timing-based attack or two would have been really nice to see. Once we do enough damage, Buzzo comes down, and for once, he doesn't hurt us. Which is strange because if you remember in the last game, he wasn't exactly the charitable type. But eventually we move forward. We unlock our Naruto run, which is essentially a better bike in every way. And we eventually run into some raiders and rando. The raiders threaten us, but just before anything was about to happen, a Joy Mutant drops down and Rando takes us away. One thing that is made clear immediately is that Rando thinks Brad didn't want to hurt Buddy and pretty much just wanted to prepare her for this world. This is very much going to be the main thematic of this game, and it's why I actually didn't cover in as much depth as I was going to in the Painful. Cause in all truthfulness, if I went fully in depth there, I wouldn't really have a whole lot to talk about here, so... Basic video formatting. Rando's your first, and I hate to say it, only party member. I'll have more to say when we get to combat, but I had to say that immediately. Anyways, Rando is pretty fucking beefy, starting off 14 levels above Buddy, and his intentions are pretty clear from the get-go. He's tired of the constant bloodshed, and he knows that Buddy is the only chance that this world will have at a future. So he's going to try his very best to keep her safe, all the while making sure she doesn't do anything batshit insane. He fails horribly very quickly. Also, pain mode isn't in this game. Which is kind of a good thing because, to be entirely honest, there's not really a whole lot of reason for it to be in this. And I'm not going to imply that this game should have one, but I personally really loved it in Painful. To the point I think a lot of the complaints I had about it are actually a lot better if you start in pain mode. And is this a popular opinion? I'm going to go ahead and say outright, probably fucking no. But, at least for myself personally, I'd love to see a return. Even if I don't think I would ever advocate for it. Anyways, we get to our first real encounter against 6 fucking dudes. And I'll refrain from talking about my biggest complaint in this game for the time being, but if you've played this, I think you kind of know where I'm going already. Anyways, we get to this big hill, mountain thing, and there's a list of names. That list of names is the people who run everything from top to bottom. Ranging from most important and most powerful to least important and least powerful. Although to clarify, the bottom of the list isn't just like Jeffrey from across the street. If your name is on this list whatsoever, you're pretty fucking important, but if you're at the top of the list, you're big. Not big, big with 2 E's. That's how fucking big you are. Afterwards, you rest in a nearby rando outpost, and Rando is immediately informed that these 3 dudes right here had to knock out and tie Buddy to keep her safe, complaining about her violence and her outbursts. Rando is pretty justifiably pissed. He slowly crawls towards Buddy, and yeah. Safe to say that analysis wasn't exactly wrong. A little bit later though, Buddy says something that sets the tone for the rest of the game. After she saw the list, she knows what she has to do. She has to kill everyone on that list. As she is the one woman left on Earth, she is very literally one of a kind, and in a weird sense, more important than anybody else on the planet. With this information in mind, she wants to rule Olathe. She wants her name at the top of that list, and she wants everybody to fear her. Rando very poorly tries to intervene by telling her about the scars on her body and the suffering that she's already went through. Buddy is already pretty fucking blunt as she immediately says that she doesn't feel anything, and that Rando is either with her or without her. And for the time being, he'll be with her. He's already extremely nice as he offers to watch over Buddy while she sleeps to ensure that she doesn't get hurt or injured, which is already a very nice callback to how generous he was in the last game, and also a nice way of dealing with the consequences of resting in the open world. At least for now, you don't really have to worry about choice encounters or random shit that happens when you go to rest. Buddy will always wake up fully healed without anything happening, but Rando won't. I believe you're almost always going to have to heal him with healing items, which is a really great way of balancing the resting both in a gameplay sense and in a story sense. Anyways, afterwards we'll get to the area's first crossroads, and just like the last game, I don't think I'm really going to get too in depth with them. They're mostly very wacky, very goofy areas with weird archetypes of weird people acting in weird ways. And although you are very literally crossing a name off the list every time you go into a new crossroads area, I would struggle to call the areas themselves important, rather that they're more important as a whole, which, don't get me wrong, I didn't expect to go into every zone expecting heartbreak and serious dramatic options and what have you, but when you're putting this much emphasis on going through every crossroads for a very specific reason, I can't help but think it's strange that in terms of quality and options and what they provide, they're very similar to Lease of the Painfuls, in which the reasons you went through those zones are often who the fuck knows. And other than a very few standout encounters, I genuinely couldn't tell you a goddamn thing about any of these crossroads. Like, yes, I know I'm crossing off the names of the most powerful men in Olathe, but how'd they become the most powerful men in Olathe? It's an incredibly basic question that goes around with the entire fucking concept of this game, and I'm gonna be honest, very few actually go in depth on why these zones exist and why they're considered the most powerful people. And the few that do are genuinely considered the best in the game. Am I asking for a civilization level breakdown like Vega Van Dam is most well known for his export of corn and his authoritarian government style, and no, obviously I'm not, but when most of the game is revolving around the plot of becoming the most powerful person in Olathe, I can't help but think it's a missed opportunity that a lot of the most powerful people in Olathe are just like regular dudes that you'd find in anywhere else in the game. I can't help but think that the entire basis of this DLC was just undercooked. Anyways, I need to move on just so I can actually talk about the stuff that's happening in real time and not have another 5 minutes dedicated to gameplay systems that haven't even been discussed yet or brought up. Like I was saying, a lot of plot and exposition happens after resting in between every name being crossed off. The first rests are all pretty simple. Rando going Buddy, what the fuck, and Buddy going shut the fuck up Rando ad infinitum. But at some point the ending of Pain Mode is finally addressed to Buddy that Rando is Dustin Armstrong, or Dusty, and they're pretty much brother and sister. Which makes a lot more sense why Dustin is trying to talk about Brad and why Buddy is the way she is. I like this cutscene a lot. It brings up the ending in a way that makes sense to the characters, and it acts as a reveal to anybody who hasn't played Pain Mode. Although it is kind of obvious since your attack is also called Armstrong style, but that's besides the point. It's one of the many times that an epilogue or ending from Lease of a Painful is directly brought up, and as somebody who went through Pain Mode on their first try, I really enjoyed seeing this come up. Anyways, more crossroads happen. There's a town full of only pacifists, which haven't been disturbed by anyone, exclusively just based on how much time and effort it took to build this up in a world as perilous as this one. And again, another thing a lot of people point out is that you don't have to fight any of the pacifists, but every time you walk by one, you have to make the conscious effort of whether or not you want to fight them. It's a very nice way of portraying the town and Buddy's thought process, second guessing whether or not she wants to kill an entire town of innocent pacifists, or not killing an entire town full of innocent pacifists. It's a very black and white choice, to the point that it makes Fallout 3 look fucking subtle, but one that is very deliberate. Anyways, eventually enough names are crossed off that Dustin just leaves, and it really is Buddy all on her own. Afterwards, though, you can actually go down this cave and experience what I am very much hoping is the canon ending. Besides this though, crossroads still happen, and I'm not exactly fond of going from one tangent straight into another, but we need to talk about the combat. It really just doesn't work with one or two party members. Lease of a Joyful is painfully easy. And this isn't strictly a negative, by the way, but it's the way that it becomes easier that I have a lot of problems with. Like, for example, the party members. In Least of a Painful, every party member is expendable. They all have very obvious weaknesses and strengths and qualities and ways to use them. But in Least of a Joyful, Buddy is just a badass and will pretty much hit Least of a Painful's endgame and damage by like, not even halfway through the list. And it's fucking insanity. And also on Joy, so in Painful there's endings if you do Joy and if you don't do any, yeah? This game doesn't have that. You can do every single pill you get, or none at all, and you will still get the same endings. Again, this isn't bad on paper, but you get Joy a fuck ton, way too often. I feel like I had 2 to 5 at my disposal for every encounter in the game, which completely trivializes it with the amount of one-on-one boss battles. And even excluding the endings, using Joy in Painful felt more of a conscious choice. There are a lot of party members who start off with a Joy withdrawal that were usually super powerful, and had great powers if you used Joy, but if you refrained, they were more often than not going to be a liability. Likewise, using Joy on a party member who's never done it can get them addicted, and that's not good for very similar reasons. In this game it doesn't really matter. And again, since most boss battles are going to be one-on-one, why wouldn't you just spam the uber powerful super buff and completely trivialize it? And to directly tie that into what I'm going to say next, this game does not play well with the fact that you're only playing Buddy. There are a few encounters that came close, but most of the problems that would inherently come from swapping from 4 party members to 1 just don't show up. Item management and deciding when to heal should, on paper, be more important than ever because every time you use an item, that's a turn you're not inflicting status conditions, you're not hurting the enemy, you're not progressing the fight. There should be debates going on internally where you're deciding, should I use status conditions to buy some time? Should I heal up and use some of my very limited supplies so I can stay safe? Or should I go for all-out offense and hope I kill him quickly so I can maintain my supplies? None of that ever happens. Buddy has a lot of tools in her arsenal that all sound interesting, but usually you're going to be best off just spamming stabs unless you're fighting more than one enemy, in which you might go for a poison or a sleep bomb first, and then start stabbing shit. So it's not really as interesting or as engaging as its predecessor, which is again, okay. There's a lot of games on this list that have very lukewarm combat. But to tie this back into my last tangent, you're crossing names off of a list. The most powerful leaders of this country. Like for example, Big Lincoln. In a list of the most powerful people, he is at the top. He is a warlord. He is described as a leviathan of a man. And then I get to him, I take 2 joy pills, I stab him, and I kick his fucking ass. And I will go ahead and say this might be the intention that the game was going for. But if it wasn't translated well, or wasn't conveyed thoroughly. Again, it feels undercooked. And when you have a very underdeveloped story that is very reliant on combat and killing, that in of itself feels underdeveloped, it just makes me feel apathetic towards this entire part of the story. And again, I found myself oftentimes just disregarding every part of the story because after these points, you have a lot of very interesting setups, and conversations, and dialogue. And it feels like something was lost in translation or in development because every part of this just feels like an afterthought. Which is forgivable, until that afterthought takes up a solid 70% of your game. And I hate to drag this out, and I promise this is the last point I'm going to make, but I think it's really depressing that I'm just subconsciously telling myself, okay, you've ranted for however many minutes, let's go ahead and get to the parts that you love, and it's near the end of the game. You get the point. You find that Rando is being hanged to a pole with barbed wire over a large chasm, and he begs for forgiveness towards Buddy since he was complicit with her kidnapping. You either let him go and let him fall to his death, or hold on to the barbed wire. But eventually this guy shows up, and either way you're gonna have to let him go. Eventually you defeat him, you climb down the chasm, and he's either going to be dead, or he's barely clinging on to life, in which you can slit his throat as an act of revenge for complicity, or as a mercy killing. There's an ending that directly correlates with this choice, and honestly the thing I love the most about this game is its endings and its epilogues. There is a lot of variation and a lot of choices in endings. Like, for example, how much damage you did to Brad at the beginning of the game comes up in the ending. And for a real backhanded compliment, would I ever recommend replaying this game to see all the endings? No, nor would I recommend Lisa the Painful for that, although for different reasons. However, just go on the Lisa Wikipedia and look at all the endings. There really is a lot to admire. Also, back at it again with the backhanded compliments, but the one thing I actually think is really cool about crossing off names on the list, every name you cross off, the route to your next victim gets more and more bloody and more disturbing. Which is genuinely a really great way of showing just how much bloodshed and terror you're causing to this world in your vindictive quest. Eventually you get to the very end, and there's this man who can evidently control the mutants, and you get to fight the one that was attempting to kill you at the very start of the game. This guy is Dr. Yado? And he's the basis of a lot of speculation and theories, as he's the one who created Joy to destroy all mankind and rebuild it in his own twisted image. He's also the one who conceived Buddy with his wife, who he killed after the birth, and tracked down Brad as the person to take care of the girl because of his past trauma. And despite this 4D game of chess he's playing and the batshit insanity of it all, everything he did work, except for one massive stick. Buddy survived the war, and even killed his Joy Mutants, and that was not supposed to happen by any metric. The thing is, unless you play this game a lot and go through all the endings, or have a guide on how to get all the endings, you're not really going to find out a whole lot about this guy in one playthrough. I'll be honest with you, Captain, I didn't. And I don't want to do this again, but genuinely, if you're expecting a really deep analysis on this character, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I digress. Eventually you kick the shit out of this mutant and you begin to fight Yado. And this fight is when the psychedelic and weird dark shit starts to go into overdrive. Buddy starts suffering from hallucinations very early on, and what the fuck's going on? I don't know. You start to kill off Rando instead of Yado eventually, and after doing so you see a vision of Brad in a really fucking depressing scene that I hate. It sucks. I despise this. I love it. After this gut punch, you confront him at a cliff before Buzzo kills him off. Then there's one more battle you have to go through as Buzzo starts to very rapidly transform into this thing, and I don't like it. Once you kill it off, you get the last choice of the game that chooses your main ending. You begin to hallucinate more and more, with Rando appearing at the other side of the cliff, telling Buddy exactly what she wants to hear. That she's a god, a queen, and yada yada yada. And right behind you, your dad starts to appear. And you either get to stay with your hallucinations, which gives you the join them endings, or you take the vaccine that you get off of Yado and get the leave them ending. Myself personally, I went with the join them ending at first, and it's not a particularly great sign to see. With this transformation, you completely doom humanity. The leave them ending simply has you with Yado's trumpet alongside Brad and the same baby. Although it's a bit less fucked than the last ending, the baby's father is, despite many attempts on guessing who it is, entirely unknown. Another thing to note is that Rando has a dedicated grave to his memory instead of being there alongside Buddy. Really, I'd like to imagine that this is the quote, good ending, but only just because the join them ending is so disturbing and fucking awful. There's also all the epilogues, which I can't go in depth with, but again, they're all great. They have very wildly different ways on how to obtain them, and generally, I would highly recommend reading up on them at the very least. And I will say one thing about the endings that I didn't really realize until I was about to get to the summary, is that a lot of this ending, in a sense, feels very disconnected from the main game. Specifically with Buzzo and Yado. Like, don't get me wrong, I like how they actually explained a lot of the stuff that was brought up in Painful, but not a whole lot of it really applies with your adventure in Joyful, barring a few choice dialogues or encounters. But I don't want to repeat myself again, so instead, let's get to the summary so I can repeat myself again. As a package deal with Lease of a Painful, I really like Lease of a Joyful. It explores a lot of themes and questions and weird hypotheticals that the last game brought up, but didn't really answer or explain in as much depth as you would hope. But when you really start to analyze Lease of a Joyful on its own, I can't help but feel that it's a tad bit disappointing. And I don't mean like comparing it on its own as if you didn't play Lease of a Painful, I mean comparing it on its own merits. The individual storylines and plots in this just didn't get me to care, and I felt like for the most part I was playing this game just to get to the next part of the story. And this could be the developer's intentions. I say this over and over and over again. Because if the intention was to make you feel as null and heartless and as mindlessly violent and edgy as Buddy is, they fucking succeeded. But when I look at the Kickstarter and it's the last girl stretch goal, what happened? Who am I? Why am I the only girl? Explore these questions and more with this additional gameplay content starring Buddy. And the Steam page has features such as collect new masks, Buddy can dash, which is an objective fact I suppose, flash your enemies, I guess, all new enemies and areas and new timed attacks. I just don't think that's the intention. And the thing is, all the best things about this game, you can just entirely miss. Like, there is so many great things about this game that I feel like 90% of the players are just never going to experience because it's out of the way, or you have to do some random shit to get it. And that's inherently my entire problem with this. I feel like 80% of the game I just am not allowed to think. And then I get to the 20% and I'm engrossed. I'm loving all the things in it. All the possibilities and the themes that are explored. It does a lot of things fantastically. But for everything it does fantastically, you have to slog through 20, 30, maybe even 40 minutes of this. And in all truthfulness, I know there's going to be comments left below saying, "Oh, why did you use joy? You trivialized this game for yourself." And on my very first playthrough, I very well might have. However, even if you start to impose arbitrary restrictions on yourself, such as no joy, not using specific abilities, so on and so forth, this game doesn't provide enough for that to be interesting. I honestly find it comparable to Mass Effect 1, where I'm having a fantastic time just digesting the world, exploring, finding out more about everything, and then it's like, Shepard, get in the fucking car, and I don't want to play the goddamn game anymore. But while Mass Effect will take you 15 hours at least, and it's the first part of a series that is well loved, this is the final part of a series that is going to take you 4 hours at most. However, I still think in a lot of ways this is worth a buy. I would pay $5 exclusively for that one scene where I had to fight Brad and it just tore my fucking heart out. But I can't help but feel that it fell short in a lot of ways. Let's talk about something completely different. Hylix. I think there comes a time in every game I've covered where you kind of get the point of what to expect. Off is a wacky, quirky RPG with moments of genuine respite and reflection. It proposes a world that is very strange, one where a lot of things happen that definitely shouldn't, but by the end everything makes sense in its own obscure way. Lease of a Painful and Joyful are games that share that similar thematic, games where you get to play through a strange world with stranger characters, yet the characters make sense in that world, and although there is a ton of lighthearted idiocy, it's often interjected with genuinely solemn, hateful, or otherwise remorseful moments that get you to think about the overall world and its inhabitants a little bit deeper. My analysis for Hylix? I think both of these games